And they have been invited here to testify on behalf of Kerry Marshall. But my rhetorical skills are not good enough for such testimony because Kerry's work is the testimony. Kerry's work is very prophetic. So one might start a discussion of the paintings of Kerry Marshall by invoking and questioning the meaning of color in his painting practice. Color in Marshall's paintings functions as a sign of denotative and also connotative intention. It is meant, on the one hand, to denote certain regimes of perception, the way things appear in a field of vision, how images materialize and become present before the beholder. At a deep psychological level, Marshall deploys color to thematize figural blackness, and in so doing, to reframe the utopia of the black figure in the field of classical representation. The very density of chromatic blackness in Kerry's work functions on a philosophical level because it binds the figures that he paints within the frames of his pictures in the longue durée of historical developments in which the presence of the black subject have been defined and also contested. In this sense, Kerry's work is about figurations of presence and absence. In the history of art, the portrait of the human subject stands as the honorific genre par excellence, the mnemonic device by which past and present lives are encountered. But when we come to the paintings and portraiture of Kerry's work, we also have to speak about power. In the past, portraiture was the visual medium, the incisive tool for communicating the power and the visibility of the portrayed subject. Within the regime of images, photography irrevocably changed and democratized portraiture. But this transformation by photography was an instrument laden with symbols and metonymies of status. The linkage of techniques of depiction and values of presentation meant that the portrait was always the hallowed province of the exalted, of somebodies, rather than the prosaic nobodies who populated the lower reaches of society. It was in these lower reaches of society that a black subject resided. And it is precisely the relegation of the black subject outside the frame of representation that Kerry sought to problematize. And in so doing, he came to question the very effectiveness of painting as a transcendental space of unique aesthetic experience. Kerry, in his analytical and incisive probing of painting, settled on portraiture to ask the question, how does one become a subject? How does a black figure become human? And how does the black self become present in the field of vision? For Kerry to be portrayed in a painting carried powerful connotations, as well as implications of how we read the black subject in the blighted field of racial hysteria. Imagine then, given this representational field, what a portrait of a black subject must look like in a museum, especially within the context of what Frantz Fanon called the epidermal schema of racial ordinance, where social hierarchies we are riddled with stereotypes. We are in Europe, and I think it's very important that we do not delude ourselves in thinking that the offering that Kerry's work is making is one that can be so easily appropriated and inserted into the canons of European representation. Because Kerry's project at its heart is in many ways anti-portraiture. It is a way to deconstruct the portrait, to bring it down from the rafters where it has been placed, and to humanize it, to let us see also the way art itself is not only the exalted space of representation, but the space that has perpetuated the vision of the human subject, that in fact art colluded in painting a portrait of a whole category of human beings who were deemed not to be worthy of representation. So, in Frantz Fanon's text, the young white child exclaims at the sudden sight of a black figure on the public transit, and he says, "Mama, look, a Negro." The child's sudden exclamation speaks to two issues: the appearance and the visibility of the formerly invisible subject. One also recalls the resignation of the protagonist in Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, relating in the opening of the novel's prologue several causes of his own invisibility, which was not exactly, as he said, a biochemical accident to my epidermis. That invisibility to which I refer, the subject says, occurs because of a peculiar disposition of the eyes of those with whom I come in contact. So in a sense, to look at Kerry's work is to think about the gaze. That Kerry's work challenges the gaze. It challenges the gaze to look at the black subject. Because if you go to a museum, for example, the portrait of a black person is not merely any portrait. It is, before and everything else, first and foremost, a political image, because it forces us to look at it. It forces us to deal